As part of the rise of Antichrist, there will be a counterfeit heavenly council and courtroom. Welcome to Beyond the Verse, where we will explore the cosmic courtroom. Psalm 82:1 states, God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. The word used for Yahweh, God, and the lowercase g gods are both the same Hebrew word, Elohim. This is because the word simply means divine beings. As the late Dr. Michael Heiser always stated, Yahweh is an Elohim, but no other Elohim is Yahweh. And in this particular setting, we see God, Yahweh, and Elohim take his place in the divine council as the one who has authority to judge the other gods. This sets up a framework of how God's divine council operates in heaven. In Daniel 7, starting in verse 9, it says, As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. If we are to understand this literally, 1,000 thousands means millions serving him, with 10,000 times 10,000 standing before him, which amounts to 100 million. It's fascinating to note that estimates suggest that there have been about 117 billion people who have ever lived. If that were the case, these 100 or so million who serve God and are with him in this heavenly courtroom setting amounts to just 0.1%. We also see the books opened, which are divine records or legal documents for judgment. Revelation chapter 4, starting at verse 2. At once I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne stood in heaven, with one seated on the throne. And he who sat there had the appearance of jasper and carnelian, and around the throne was a rainbow that had the appearance of an emerald. Around the throne were 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones were 24 elders, clothed in white garments, with golden crowns on their heads. What we get from all of these descriptions of a heavenly assembly is that all of our judicial systems of judgment and courts on earth are a direct mirror of the actual heavenly court that exists in the divine realm. And this is where we can begin to understand that an earthly version of the heavenly court will ultimately become the greatest counterfeit, with signs and wonders. We know this because we see Daniel 7's little horn emerge within the context of thrones and judgments. In other words, the beast that is part of the rise of the Antichrist is part of this counterfeit divine council. All of this matters for eschatological study because one can begin to understand why Jesus talked about the days of Noah as being the conditions for his return in Matthew 24. Part of extra-biblical commentary on the Tower of Babel from the ancient Near East, like the Book of Jasher, suggests that the rebellion that was associated with the building of the tower was to climb up to get to the heavenly court and kill God. If that were such the purpose, it would make sense that the ultimate manifestation of the Antichrist, a counterfeit earthly divine assembly, would harness every bit of the pride that caused the fall of Satan himself. We know all of this ends with the judgment of not only humans, but more importantly, perhaps, the disenfranchised, corrupt divine beings who rebelled against God's plans. The beast system is a counterfeit divine council. There are other passages that refer to the divine council, such as Job 1:6 and 1 Kings 22, verse 19. But I'd like to connect everything we've discussed so far to 1 Corinthians 6, verses 2 through 3, where it says, Or do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if the world is to be judged by you, are you incompetent to try trivial cases? Do you not know that we are to judge angels? How much more then matters pertaining to this life? Many believers are familiar with this passage about how the church will judge angels, but they don't necessarily realize that this is council language. Humans redeemed in Christ are elevated to a role above the rebellious divine beings. Revelation 3 verse 21 emphasizes this point. The one who conquers, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne, and I also conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne. Those who overcome are invited to the council chamber itself, as co-heirs with Christ. This is also found in the Old Testament, back in Daniel 7 verse 27, where it says, And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. Their kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey them. This authority handed to the saints in God's great Eschaton has everything to do with being part of God's divine council. So, to review this idea, largely made popular by the late Dr. Michael Heiser, the rebel Elohim from Psalm 82 were sentenced to die like men. This rebellion leaves unoccupied seats in the divine council. Christ takes authority of those seats, and the faithful in Christ are not just saved from sin, but are also installed as part of God's new divine council.